Hello everyone, this is Stjepan and welcome to Hanging Pawns. The game I'm about to show you was played between Wesley and Vladimir Kramnik in round 5 of the candidates tournament. Wesley was in last place after the first 4 games with only 1 point, while Kramnik had an excellent start with 2.5 out of 4. So both had very big reasons to win this game, different reasons though. Wesley had to get back into the tournament by getting his first win, and Kramnik definitely must have wanted to stay among the leaders. Wesley had the white pieces and he opened with pawn to c4, the English opening, and we have the Asian court defense by Kramnik, e6. Knight f3, d5 and d4, and the position now transposes to a queen's gambit declined, a classical position, just with a different move order, not starting with d4, d5. Knight to f6, knight to c3, and c5 in this position by Vladimir Kramnik, and after c takes d5, this is now the Semi-Tarrasch variation of the queen's gambit declined. Not the most exciting opening in the world, actually. It's very well analyzed and known, and players now played several moves of main theory. Knight takes d5, e4, knight takes c3, b takes c3. This resembles a Grunfeld a bit, but instead of g6, black played e6. C takes d4, c takes d4, bishop b4 check, bishop to d2, very boring and very theoretical. This position has been seen a few thousand times in Grandmaster games. Bishop takes d2, queen takes, castles, and bishop c4. In this position, Vladimir finally chooses something other than the main line. Instead of the most common move, knight to c6, he plays knight to d7, which is rarely played from this position. And Wesley saw castles. And even though the position is theoretically equal and well known, it's worth mentioning that while white constantly has a small edge, just over half a pawn, and he has more space, and his pieces, the knight and bishop, are both visually and practically more active, while, especially now that Kramnik chose to play knight to d7 instead of to c6, the bishop still has to develop, and the knight doesn't have so many useful squares. He has f6 and b6, but perhaps it would have been better on c6 immediately. We have b6 by Kramnik, preparing to develop the bishop to b7, rook a to d1, centralizing, bishop to b7, rook f to e1, by Wesley getting his second rook out. And I can hardly imagine a more boring position, to be honest. Perhaps an exchange French would compare to this in how boring it is. And once again, I blame Wesley for not showing some gut and going for a sharper line. He could have played d4 on move 1, just trying to surprise Kramnik a bit. He's doing horribly in the tournament so far, and he needs to start pushing for wins and not go for Semi-Tarrasch and drawing positions similar to it. Excuse my frustration, but I'm just mad at him. He should be pushing for wins more. Anyway, in this position, Kramnik plays rook to c8. We have bishop to b3, retreating, the bishop was attacked. Rook to e8. h3, making some luft and making sure there is no back rank problems later on. Knight to f6, queen to f4, knight h5, queen retreats, queen goes to e5, knight f6, the queen goes back to f4, knight h5, and now queen h2 by Wesley, declining a draw for now, not going for the repetition the second time. h6 by Vladimir, and d5, finally some initiative from Wesley. He strikes in the center energetically, and we have e takes d5, e takes d, rook takes e1 by Vladimir Kramnik, and of course knight takes e1, not taking with the rook because the strong passed d pawn is attacked twice, and taking with the rook would undefend it and blunder it, so he takes with knight takes e1, queen f6 in this position from Vladimir, knight to d4, exploiting the fact that the queen is no longer attacking d5, so he can block the defense of the rook to the pawn, bishop to a6, attacking the knight, queen to e5, and now Kramnik makes an interesting choice. He decides to give up his bishop for the knight with bishop takes d3, and that's actually a very good choice in this position, because the knight was very good in pushing the pawn forwards, and he could have unblocked the pawn's path if the queen stood in the way, for example. And Wesley doesn't recapture the bishop, he just takes the knight on h5, an otherwise decision. A trade which favors nobody really and just leads them to closer to a completely drawn position, but at least from now on they try to win, I can say that. And Wesley does stand a bit better with the passed pawn, but it can easily be blockaded for now and stopped. We have bishop to c2, attacking the rook, rook to c1, bishop f5. And now the rook is undefended, so Wesley takes, rook c8, bishop c8, the rooks get traded, and d6, pushing the pawn forward. And now it's already starting to look a bit menacing, and of course in this position Kramnik can't capture the pawn because f7 is hanging, so if queen takes d6, queen takes f7. So he plays g5, forcing his pawns forward a bit, queen to d1, defending the pawn now, threatening d7, winning, because the bishop would have to give itself up, because if it moves the pawn would win. Threatening just to win the game, but Kramnik is in time to stop it with bishop to d7. We have queen to d5, once again attacking f7, and if the queen should move, white would just be winning. King g7, at least unpinning. And now a horrible move by Wesley showing that he just isn't in top form this tournament. He plays queen to b7, attacking the useless b pawn for now, and it's completely unimportant in this position, but he failed to notice that just blunders his strongest asset, the passed d pawn, with a simple queen check. Kramnik immediately played queen to a1 check, and after king to h2 retreating, queen e5 check, just winning d6. It's as simple as that. So king g1, queen takes d6, and now Wesley has to take the a7 pawn. He takes on a7 with queen takes, and this is now completely drawing. He traded his biggest asset in the position for Kramnik's worst pawn. Wesley lost the only weapon in the position for both players actually. The game went on for a few more moves, but it was completely drawing from now on. h5 by Vladimir, queen to b7, h4, advancing his pawns, but there isn't much they can accomplish. Queen to f3, queen e7, queen to c3 check, f6, queen to c4, threatening to enter black's position on g8, queen e8 defending, and players are maneuvering and looking for a possibility to create an attack or improve their position, but it's very hard since the pawn structure is almost symmetrical, both kings are almost perfectly safe, and they both have just the queen and bishop, which is hardly ever enough for a mating opportunity with so many pawns on the board. We have queen to b4 by Wesley in this position, b5, a3, queen to e5, bishop to d1, and bishop to c6. And here Wesley plays the first move I really admire from him this tournament. He plays bishop to f3, and now, of course, I don't know what he was thinking, but I think it's in fact a bad move, but it offers Kramnik to create an imbalance in the position, an imbalance that could bring to a decisive result possibly. More likely for Kramnik though, because white would have doubled pawns, but still, Wesley should be congratulated for trying to create an imbalance and trying to go for a win, actually. But Kramnik declines the trade, actually, and he declines to ruin white's pawns. He meekly retreats with bishop to e8. We have king to f1, getting the king closer to the center, bishop f7, bishop e2, bishop e8, bishop to f3, just maneuvering pieces around the board, not really doing anything. Both sides aren't doing anything. f5, advancing, king to g1, bishop to f7, queen to d2, attacking g5 in this position, king g6 defending, queen to c1, perhaps trying to enter c6 with the queen for a check, bishop e6, queen to c6, pinning the bishop, king f6, defending once more, so now the queen is free to move, queen e8, queen a1, attacking a3 with check, king h2, and now queen takes a3. Kramnik wins a pawn, but it isn't that significant in this position. And of course Wesley shouldn't recapture on b5, because if he takes with queen to d5, black would have an advantage with g4. It would be a pretty strong move, and h takes g, f takes g. The best move in this position would be to give up the bishop and just be a piece down, but it should still be pretty hard to win for black, but there would be a possibility at least. So definitely after queen takes a3, it's unwise to take the b pawn. He plays queen to d8 instead, checking the king, queen e7, and queen h8 check. And note that now this was a nice attempt by Wesley. This is actually a pretty dangerous position for black. Black is forced to play queen to g7, covering the check, and if he moves his king anywhere, if he moves it to f7 or g6, the two possible squares, that would be a mate in 2. So let's say king to g6, just bishop to h5. Sorry, mate in 1, just mating, because all the other squares are covered by the queen. So after queen to h8, of course, Kramnik saw that trick and played queen to g7. We have queen to d8 check, king g6, queen e8, queen f7, defending, queen takes b5, Wesley regains his pawn, and after queen to c7 check, they agreed to a draw. It's completely justified. There is nothing any side can do to even try to win this. So four games were played in round 5, and all 4 games were unfortunately draws. That's very disappointing. Let's hope we see some more exciting games tomorrow and that players try to push for wins more. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you got something from this game, and see you soon with more analysis from the candidates, as I will be covering all the games. Cheers, see you later, bye.